Hello, people. I hope you're happy and healthy, and that is from the heart. Faux reals. Now let's get into this shit. I'll do my best to keep the shit talking as well as this video to a minimum, which will be hard because there is a whole lot of fuckery going on, and it's sad that assholes have made a career off of a man's demise. But anyway, let's start with this. A statement made by Michael Azerrad about meeting Cobain for the biography he was writing about Nirvana. As we can read, Mr. Azerrad said Kurt was in bed, going through withdrawals, and AMD looks sick. Now let's see what Jackie Ferry said about Kurt Cobain when she took Frances to visit him in the Exodus Recovery Center. Ms. Ferry states that Kurt was happy and played with his daughter. Her statement can be validated by the statement made by Cobain's friend, Joe Mama, when he says, "Cobain looked great. I was expecting Kurt to look like shit, but he looked great." Now, does that sound like someone who is in active drug addiction? I'm not saying Kurt didn't or shouldn't have been in rehab, because everyone needs a vacation sometimes. But I'm asking, was Kurt using drugs at the time he entered the Exodus Recovery Center? I say, fuck no. And I'll assume the doctors at Exodus said the same thing, because if you look, you can see that there isn't any medication that is used for combating the opiate withdrawal symptoms that Cobain would have started to experience while at Exodus on Cobain's toxicology report. Heroin doesn't mask methadone, so it would have certainly been on Cobain's toxicology report. Also, upon entering the Exodus Recovery Center, he would have been drug tested and prescribed the necessary medication to help him withdraw safely. All other medication besides the morphine is at what would be considered therapeutic levels, so that would mean that Cobain was clean and didn't need help with withdrawals before he left Seattle. I'm also going to say that Cobain didn't leave Exodus to score drugs, because he could have scored in Los Angeles, nor did he have his driver drop him off at a dealer spot when he arrived back in Seattle. I'm not saying Cobain didn't use once he got back to Seattle. I'm saying he was clean before he left, and he was clean when he arrived back home. Now, Joe Burns says that Kurt was using when he got back from Exodus. So, if that was the case, then why does Joe Burns state that Mark Lanigan and Dylan Carlson, and a third person, which we will address here shortly, these three people had to struggle and hold Cobain down to inject the 1.52 milligrams of heroin in him? See, according to Joe Burns, Kurt was high as a kite, so high that he was nodding off while talking to Joe, so it would have been easy for three people to commit the big dirty against Cobain, the way Mr. Burns states the big dirty was carried out. But again, Cobain struggled and was eventually subdued when someone hit him over the head with a heavy object. Does that sound like someone who is using a drug that causes them to be in a relaxed state and nod the fuck off? Again, I say, fuck no! So now I've changed my mind, and I'm going to say, Kurt did not use drugs when he got home in Seattle, which would explain the struggle that ensued when Kurt realized what the fuck his friends were doing. Well, I guess I should say alleged friends, because if my homie's wife said she would pay me this and that to commit the big dirty against my friend, I would tell my homie, and do what I could to make sure no one pulled the big dirty on my friend. But no, these dumb motherfuckers said, sure, why not, and lived happily ever after. Well, maybe not happily, but at least they fucking lived. By the way, that third person, who Joe Burns and Chris Todd said is Daniel Clint Rich, wasn't fucking Daniel Clint Rich. That dude wasn't there, and the chicks from Who Killed Kurt know he wasn't as well as Chris Todd, and of course Joe Burns. The Daniel Clint Rich story has already been debunked. You fucking liars. Now let us get into what should have been the biggest red flag that has been staring you in the face, if you have read the autopsy report, that is. But first, let's listen to Mr. Joe Burns talk about his friend Dylan Carlson.
Oh my God, Dylan was a smart cat, or whatever. He's a real smart dude. Dylan's really smart, and Dylan's a fucker.
As we heard, Joe states that Dylan is a smart cat, not like a meow kitty cat, but like he ain't no jive turkey. You dig? Joe Burns repeats this statement a couple of times. Now let's listen to Joe describe the shot he heard.
We shot a lot of guns and stuff, and it wasn't just like a regular gunshot from a pistol or a rifle. It was not as loud as a as a regular gunshot.
As we just heard, Joe Burns said he has been around and shot a lot of guns, and the shot he heard didn't sound like a normal gunshot. Let us keep those two things in mind. Dylan is a smart mofo, and made the honor roll once or twice because he is such a smart kitty cat. And Joe didn't hear a normal gunshot. These two things are very important. Now the ammunition Kurt supposedly used to commit the big dirty is called a 2 3/4-inch target load that contains 7/8 of an ounce of number 8 shot, made by Winchester. And this shotgun shell contains between 350 and 400 individual pieces of number 8 shot, or pellets, or BBs, whatever the fuck you want to call them. Let's keep that shit in mind, as well as we look over this tidbit of information the medical fucker blessed us with from Cobain's autopsy report. It states that approximately 30 pieces of shot was recovered from Cobain's noggin, as well as a distorted shot cup. So if you're like me, then you're wondering, where the fuck did roughly 370 pellets go? It doesn't make any goddamn sense, now does it? Especially considering a medical examiner would have to remove all projectiles from a body, whether the death is being investigated as an intentional big dirty or a big dirty committed by one's homies. I'm sorry, alleged homies. I digress. But also, a mortuary would require all projectiles to be removed prior to cremation. I mean, could you imagine spreading a loved one's ashes? And included are the pellets that supposedly did your loved one in. That would be fucked up. So fucked up it would be fucked down. I mean, faux real reals. Now, do we remember what Joe Burns said about Dylan Carlson and how the shot didn't sound like a normal shot? Okay, now let's listen to a small excerpt from Joe Burns' 3/4 of the truth book about that same shot.
Shit. I moved right back into the house and looked for Bonnie, but I don't remember what our conversation was like. I know she heard the gunshot, but I don't know where she was exactly when it occurred. Looking back, I wonder how no neighbors heard this, or if any actually did at all. Another thing to research, I guess.
As we heard, Joe Burns says he wonders how none of Cobain's neighbors heard the shotgun going off in the wee hours of the morning. Well, it's quite simple. Dylan Carlson is actually pretty smart for being such a dumb piece of shit. So let us look at a couple of things real quick, and then I'm going to wrap this shit up with a big red bow, in the form of me talking shit about the ladies from Who Killed Kurt and Joe Burns, and then call it quits. Like I said, Dylan is smart. They knew that if the big dirty part happened in the house, then the police would be able to search all over the home, and there isn't any telling how much evidence they might find. So, the shot happened in the greenhouse, and Dylan used a shotgun round that he modified, and did so despite some who say it isn't easy to do. Ain't that right, firearms expert Mike? You're such a goober. Well, I hate to be that person, but it's very easy if you have some knowledge of firearms, as Dylan Carlson does. All he had to do was cut the end of a shell off, remove the pellets, then the wad and some gunpowder, then reverse the process, and now he has a shotgun round that will still go off as it was intended, just with a lot less sound, and the velocity would be reduced as well. I guess Dylan was trying to be considerate of Cobain's neighbors when he pulled the trigger. Because, as we can see, the distance between Cobain's residence and his neighbors isn't very far at all, within a 1-minute walk, or 4 minutes if you take the long way. I'm sure you could cut those minutes down to seconds in you ran. So at least one of his neighbors should have heard the shot, but they didn't, and that's why Joe Burns said the shot didn't sound normal. And that's also why the autopsy report doesn't describe the amount of damage to Cobain that would normally be associated with someone who committed the big dirty with a full powder load shotgun round. Also, with the lack of gunpowder in the shell, there wouldn't be enough gases to cycle the shotgun properly, meaning the bolt could go back far enough to eject the spent round, but not enough energy to push the next round into battery, or into the chamber if you will, to be fired. Though a more likely scenario is, the shell that was used was manually ejected due to the round being modified. This whole idea that the shell should have landed somewhere else isn't all that important. A spent shell casing can bounce and land anywhere. Again, more than likely the shell was manually ejected, and that's where the shell landed. Or, fuck, maybe it was placed there. Who the fuck knows? I mean, we're talking about 2 junkies fumbling around in the dark staging a you-know-what. And why were these fools doing this shit in the dark? Well, for the same reason Kurt Cobain was never hiding out in the greenhouse. Let's look at this shit one more time. What do we see here? What is the roof of this room mainly comprised of? If you answer was windows, then you get a gold star. It's absurd to think that someone is hiding out in a room that you can essentially see through. And you certainly don't want to have the lights on in said room when you're dragging your dead friend around with a shotgun in your hands. That's for you guys who killed Kurt. Your firearms expert isn't an expert at all, and your forensic multidisciplinary bullshit is… Well, just listen. Now here is your big red bow. Who killed Kurt? You guys trip me out. I mean, you've received thousands of dollars, all based on getting the Cobain case reopened and getting those responsible held responsible. And then you come out with this multidisciplinary analysis, your big forensic linchpin, and you base it on a shotgun that is similar to the one Cobain supposedly used. I'm sorry, but that is beyond ridiculous. Because no two guns are the same. You can take two guns that were made at the same time, one right after the other, and those two firearms are going to shoot differently. The action is going to feel different, and the point of impact is going to be different. Because again, no two firearms are the same, especially considering that your test shotgun was made 40 years after the Cobain shotgun. We know this by the serial number, which puts the Cobain shotgun having been made in 1930. So you seriously owe your supporters an apology. A fucking legit sincere apology for lying and scamming them out of their dough. And Mr. Joe Burns, you're a character faux real. And all I can say is, half-truths aren't going to set you free. I don't expect you to be honest with the people who listen to these videos that are made regarding Kurt Cobain, but you need to be honest with yourself and beg Frances for forgiveness for your part in the demise of her father. That lady has not one fucking memory of him, and you and your friends facilitated that. Because you, sir, can't tell me that you didn't know what was up. You're at Cobain's house hanging out with Courtney's right-hand man, getting high and shit with the organizer of the whole deal, Callie DeWitt. And your two pals, who you knew way before you knew Kurt, just happened to show up, but you knew nothing about the fuckery that was to ensue? There wasn't a third mysterious person, because Joe, you all were friends. You would have known who the third person was, just like you knew who the second person who was with Dylan that night, which you finally admitted was Mark Lanigan. And I'm sure if the case was to go to trial, we would find out that the third person is you, Joe Burns. I say this because for 30 fucking years, you didn't say a word? Not one fucking word about what really happened to your friend, who has become the poster child for anti-big dirties against oneself. You can't tell me, Mr. Burns, that at some point, whether directly or indirectly, you didn't benefited from the spoils of the crime. In fact, you stayed friends with the people who did what they did against your friend Kurt Cobain. And not until you and Dylan Carlson had a falling out did you come forward with some half-truths. But only if the money is right, correct? I mean, you stayed in Cobain's house while he laid up in the greenhouse and gone to the afterlife life by the hands of your friends. So, you're fucking crazy to expect people to believe that you were just an innocent witness who has been traumatized by the whole ordeal. And I'm sure a jury wouldn't believe that shit either. But you don't have to worry about a jury. Not at all. Because the case will never, ever be reopened. I mean, it wouldn't matter if Courtney, Dylan, Callie, and yourself went on national television and told the world what really happened. You guys could admit responsibility for everything that happened, and you know what would be done by law enforcement? Not one goddamn thing. Not one fucking person would be arrested. In fact, the district attorney for King County and a spokesperson from the Seattle Police Department would then go on national television right afterwards and say, "We have no idea what these motherfuckers are talking about. Kurt Cobain committed the big dirty himself. Case closed." And here's why. The state of Washington isn't going to spend millions of dollars to prosecute the people who are still living, knowing the probability of the state getting a conviction is next to zero, because all the evidence against the defendants has already been told to the world due to greedy, narcissistic assholes. And then they would have to admit that the Seattle Police Department and the state of Washington's investigation teams didn't give a flying fuck when it came to investigating the Cobain case. Hell, Dylan Carlson didn't even get in trouble for purchasing the shotgun that Cobain allegedly used. That's a felony crime in itself, which Dylan admitted to. So that should show you how much the Seattle Police Department cared about the Cobain big dirty. And after that, they would have to deal with all the lawsuits and demands from the citizens of Washington to reopen their loved ones' cases based on the fuck-ups and attitude towards the Kurt Cobain case. There would be people lined up from Seattle to Kalamazoo fucking Michigan. Would I love to see it happen? You're goddamn right I would. But it's not going to, so congratulations to Joe Burns, Dylan Carlson, Courtney Love, and Callie DeWitt. You motherfuckers got away with committing the big dirty against your friend and husband. You fucking assholes. Thank you, kids, and stay happy. Also, don't let douchebags like Joe Burns in your life. You will live longer. Just saying.